Hi, Internet, and welcome to Movies Are Boring. This is the web show where two defense journalists sit down and talk about movies. My name is Matthew Galt from the website War is Boring. With me, as always, is my co-host, Kevin Nodell, the man with the beard. Say hello, Kevin.
Hello.
All right.
You also have a funny beard yourself now.
I know. I feel weird not calling you the guy with the beard, even though I've grown one now. Yours is magnificent, much better than mine. So I think we're gonna keep calling you the man with the beard.
You flatter me.
I try. So today we are going to be talking about the long-teased subject of Rambo. Not just Rambo First Blood, but every single movie in the Rambo franchise. Rambo as a whole. This is a Rambo extravaganza. So Kevin and I have watched all of the Rambo movies in preparation for this. We're going to sit and discuss Rambo with you, the fine people of the internet. Kevin, how did you enjoy your revisit to the Rambo universe?
Let me think. How do I describe it? I mean, it was wonderful. In many different kind of ways. It's a lot to take in. Also, you forget how different some of these movies are from one another, particularly the first one from all of them.
Yeah, that was kind of what surprised me as well. And just in case, just so everyone's on the same page, if you don't know what Rambo is a movie franchise started in 1983, starring Sylvester Stallone. It's one of the iconic Sylvester Stallone roles, right up there with Rocky. And the first, it's the journey of a Vietnam veteran, Green Beret, master linguist, stealth master, as he just kind of tries to get along in the world, is not able to do that, and keeps running afoul of various groups. In the first movie, he runs afoul of kind of some small town cops. And like Kevin said, the rest of the movies, people usually think of Rambo as very like this blood-pumping 80s action fare, and it is, but only kind of after the first one. The first one's this really tight psychological thriller, and I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The first movie, in terms of tone, in terms of content, and in terms of themes, is far removed from the other three. It's except for kind of the fourth one. The fourth one has a little bit of throwbacks to the first one, but still is much more in line with the other two.
Right, and I think one of the things I really like about this, I actually really like the first Rambo, especially after the rewatch. Is it really I feel like pop culture couldn't get away with this character now. You've certainly got like disgruntled veterans, doing various, like, taking out the garbage in various movies now, but you don't have, like, the beginning of the movie, Rambo's just walking. Police car pulls up and says basically, get out of town. He doesn't do it quick enough. The police push him and push him and push him, and then he snaps and he starts messing people up. And I don't feel like pop culture could get away with that now. Like police harassing veterans and making this big, huge movie. Well, maybe with the militarization of police lately, maybe we could get away with it. But anyway, I think that was very interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you can continue. I'll follow up with what you were gonna say.
And I think that people forget that the way we treat veterans now in America is far different from the way we've treated them in the past. I think this movie kind of serves as a reminder for that.
I think in part, I think 80s movies like Rambo had a big part in changing the way that we look at veterans and how we treat veterans. But also it is interesting to note that while in the other movies he's unabashedly just fighting communism and being super America, the first movie, the enemy is the American system that has cruelly used its veterans. And that is something that's very interesting about the first one and very different from the other ones.
Well, I would. The other movies, though, they do. Okay, the second, just so
The
we
second,
kind of.
okay, the second one touches on that in a very weird, very confusing, not entirely sensical way.
It is a little strange because the second movie, Rambo, First Blood Part Two, as it's wonderfully called, he's at the end of the first Rambo. He's taken to prison. So the beginning of the second Rambo opens up. His buddy comes, who's this? Is it a colonel? I forgot. Colonel Trevor.
It was his former commanding officer. So
His former commanding officer comes and says, Rambo, we need to go after the POWs. You need to help us get the POWs. And they go, and Rambo sees the POWs, but they don't want him to rescue. They just want him to take pictures. And there's all this weird, political backstory that basically allows Rambo to help out the American government while actually telling them to go to hell at the same time. But it was just kind of that movie to me was very much. We had this kind of string in the middle of the '80s where there's these revenge fantasies based around POWs. And did we leave people behind? And Chuck Norris made a movie. I think it was Delta Force 2. It's very similar to Rambo.
Well, it was we're thinking, I think, of the Braddock series.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Which I believe was 4 of them, 4 movies.
There were 4 Delta Forces, really?
Not Delta Force. No, Braddock Missing in Action. That's what franchise we're thinking of right now.
Right, but there was a bunch of these, and they all came out in the mid '80s, and I think Rambo was one of the first ones to tackle it. I would have to go look at the dates, but Rambo 2 is 1985.
Yeah.
So there's that one. Then Rambo 3, which I think is the weakest of the Rambos, is Rambo in Afghanistan. His buddy, who's this commanding officer, gets captured. Essentially, they come and get him to try to fight with the Mujahideen. He says, "No, my wars are over." Then his buddy gets captured, so Rambo has to go into Afghanistan and blow everything up and fight the Russians
and win the Cold War.
And win the Cold War, which was sad because the movie came out in 1988, when the Russian Afghanistan offensive was already starting to kind of collapse. Not well timed.
Was in power.
Yeah, not well timed. I think Glasnost was going on, Perestroika were all going on around that time too. Things were starting to kind of
those things started happening while the movie was in production, but they weren't going to stop making the movie, so they were going to show how much they loved America and hated Russians, so they were going to finish that damn movie.
I think the third one is the first one that Stallone helped write too, if I'm not mistaken. So he started to pick up writing credits around then for these.
Yeah, I know he helped write the 4th one, and it might be Rambo 3 that he started writing.
Right. He also directs the 4th one. He writes and directs the 4th one. Really taking complete ownership of the character. So Rambo 4.
Yeah, moving back to 3 though.
Yeah. One of the things I like about 3, even though it's the worst one, and it's terrible, is the portrayal of the Mujahideen then versus now. I think that's very interesting. The way that we can so easily flip these guys around.
Absolutely. I think it was very convenient at that time to have them be the oppressed people and the oppressed locals. And Rambo's always with the oppressed locals, whoever they may be, whether they be the oppressed Vietnamese or the oppressed Afghans, or in the 4th one, the oppressed Kachins in Burma. And that is kind of built in the whole idea of him being a former Green Beret, de oppresso libre. I pronounced that totally wrong. But about liberating the oppressed, and that's this whole very big idea with that ethos. But it is interesting how it's portrayed in a very Hollywoodized kind of way with these movies. and it is interesting to see how they kind of shift and are interchangeable in the Rambo movies.
Yeah, especially 3 and 4, because both of those movies end the same way. And briefly, Rambo 4 is 20 years later, Rambo fighting in Burma, now Myanmar, and fighting against genocide and trying to rescue some Christian missionaries. But in Rambo 3 and 4, the rebels are only there to kind of save his ass at the end. Like, Rambo does the bulk of the work, and then when his back's up against the wall, the rebels instantly show up in the last 5 minutes and kind of help him out and take care of everything. But it's almost the exact same scene at the end of 3 when the Mujahideen show up, and at the end of 4 when the Karen rebels show up. They are completely interchangeable. Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I wasn't going to say anything. I wanted to hear more about what you want to say about the Mujahideen.
Just that we had, I know this was in other movies in the '80s too, and they touched on this in the Aaron Sorkin Charlie Wilson's War. That in the '80s, when they were fighting against communists, they were fighting against the Russian Empire, right? That they were portrayed in very different terms in our media. And I think that if people were to go back and look at, say, Rambo 3, and you were to tell like a kid that was born in 1991, right, or 2001, that these are the guys these people that are portrayed as heroes in Rambo are the people that we were fighting against in Afghanistan. Some of them, obviously not all of them.
Right.
Very complicated, but the movies simplify these things. I think that people don't realize how quickly our alliances can turn on a dime, and how we can be embarrassed of pop culture representations after the fact. And
yeah, I mean that's why we don't talk about Rambo 3 that much.
It's not very good. It's not very good.
Well, I mean, it depends on how you look at it. You can also look at it as the most violently awesome. I mean, not anymore after Rambo 4, but for a long time, in terms of body count, Rambo 3 was considered the most violent film ever made.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I believe they kill 200 some people on screen in that movie, and it, by the numbers, is the most violent movie.
That's interesting, because now Rambo 4 has way surpassed that, because it is like grindhouse super violent. Decapitations, heads exploding.
And I guess this is as good a time for us to kind of move on to Rambo 4.
Yeah, let's do it. Rambo 4, I think, is really interesting, actually.
I do too. And we're talking about how out of control violent it is, but even more so than the other ones, and not really since the first one. It's more of a movie that actually has to say something and has a little bit more meditation on things. Granted, in a very strange sort of way, but it is saying something.
What do you think that it is saying?
Well, I mean, it's saying in a very ham-handed way that violence is immensely uncomfortable, but sometimes necessary.
Right, to fight some of these guys. They're the Myanmar regime is portrayed as brutal, genocidal rapists, essentially, in this movie.
Right.
Unapologetic. I remember my girlfriend a long time ago, or when I first met her, I had told her that I was not interested in seeing any more of the Rambo movies, and she told me they throw a baby through the air and set it on fire. And I was like, okay, well, I have to see that.
Yeah.
I can't not watch it now. And that's a small portion of some of the excess that you see here. And yeah, the Rambo's personal journey in this movie, 20 years. This movie comes out 20 years after Rambo 3, by the way, is him making peace with that fact that you gotta use violence to get shit done, essentially. Did you read anything about how this movie was received in Myanmar? I thought that was very interesting.
I did not. Please tell me.
Okay, so obviously it's banned Um, it is,
Of
but that
course.
doesn't that is not stopping people from watching it. It's a popular commodity over there, and the Karen rebels like hold viewings of it and even use some of the like the catchphrases that Rambo spouts as rallying cries, and it's very popular over there among that group, which I thought was which makes sense.
That is
Uh,
interesting, but also not entirely surprising.
no, not at all. But how crazy a world do we live in where 20 years long after the fact, Stallone can sit down and say like, "I'm going to make another Rambo movie," and then it ends up and uses a current conflict that's going on, and is able to get it recognized by the people that are involved in that conflict, and they have to react to it. I think that's kind of maybe that's as close as Rambo's going to get to high art, but but
Well, maybe, probably. I mean, yes, that is absolutely the closest that Rambo is going to get to high art.
um,
I do enjoy the interactions between him and the missionaries. Uh,
it's it's so ham-handed, but yeah, it's
it's
beautiful.
ham-handed, but it is interesting to see. Well, and it is something that we come across even in the news. Kind of white do-gooders walking into a situation and thinking that they can make this difference without their hands getting dirty. And when he gets his hands dirty to protect them, when the pirates try to kill him and the pastor gets so angry and I mean, it's ham-handed. Who are you to do that? And then him just grabbing him like, and in his best Stallone voice, who are you? Uh, Doing that. But I do think it's an interesting scene and asks that question in very ham-handed terms, but it kind of asks the white do-gooders of the world who think they can bring peace with their drum circle. Who are you to think you can do that?
Yeah, these people wander into the jungle. They have food and supplies. They just want to give them to people. They have none of them seem to speak the language. They're naive, and yeah, that's an interesting portrayal and not one that you see, I think, a lot unless it's in a horror movie. You know,
Mhm.
not one you see in film a lot. And the more I think about Rambo 4, the more I like it. As cheesy as it is.
All right. I mean, it's very ham-handed, but it is an interesting movie, and it actually does have some things to say.
Yeah, he really tried to do something there.
The
And
other thing I think that is interesting is, despite the fact that Rambo does continue to be mega super soldier, this is the only one where he's fighting with a team.
yeah, I noticed that too. I thought that was interesting. And I actually mentioned that to my girlfriend. It was like, this is like, I don't buy the mercenaries. I think this is weird. She's like, look, Stallone's old. He's a little chubby now. This is the only way you can buy that this is happening is if these group of mercenaries is there with him. Which I think is somewhat true. I mean, he keeps his shirt on the whole time, which is rare for a Rambo movie. It's
There's a
the
reason for that, though.
Yeah, there's a reason for that. No one wants to see that, not anymore. But I also think that it's maybe doesn't reflect the changing face of warfare a little bit with the rise of these private military corporations. He's kind of just throwing in another little element there. Do you think, or do you think that's just
I think in part he is. I think also because people are into teams now and they like seeing their elite military team in movies.
you're
So he
yeah
wanted,
there's
so he wanted to throw in the elite mercenary team with the cool nicknames.
Yeah, there's that scene on the boat that was very like when you first meet the mercenaries that is just all about establishing the the like one aspect of these mercs that separates them from all the others. There's the guy that sings, there's angry British guy, there's the Asian with the beard. Like it's just it was I guess I enjoyed them more than I thought I did in retrospect.
Yeah. No, that's the thing about this movie is the more you think about it, the more you realize that you didn't just watch a complete piece of crap.
It was honest. which I think is important for movies. It wasn't really trying to do anything that it wasn't meant that it didn't set out to do. Yeah, it was good. I think the Rambo series as a whole, except for three, is pretty surprisingly good, especially the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Which is more like a thriller or a horror movie. You know, this is the townspeople rising up and chasing Frankenstein's monster through the woods. And
Mm-hmm.
Stallone has said that he thought of it as a Frankenstein movie. Um, have you heard anything about? All right, in one thing I do want to talk. Another thing I want to talk about. I had teased that I have a fan theory about the Rambo films at the end of our last movies are boring conversation, and I want to bring this up because I think I like it. I like
Talk
the
about that. I
movie.
actually want to bring up one last thing with Rambo. Have you ever seen
Okay.
any of the Rambo cartoon series?
When I was a kid, yes, but it's been years.
There's something really interesting about that cartoon series that I
Okay.
just want to point out. He doesn't kill anyone in that show ever. All he ever does is nonviolent solutions.
Really?
Well, I mean, you can't just kill off like it. You can't just off people in cartoons. I mean, you can now, but this was the '80s. Like you can't just do that.
Can you give me an example of some non-violent solutions that he came up with?
I mean, basically just kind of Roadrunner and Coyote type shit, you know?
Just
Just like he knocks them out. He sets little green beret traps that are non-lethal traps.
I
And
assume
he
that.
and I think it's even in the narration that he's a man of peace.
Well, we know that from Rambo 3 because it opens up with him, at the Buddhist temple helping out the
Right. It's
monks.
it's kind of like an alternate version of Rambo 3 where he stays at the temple. But anyway,
that's
I just wanted to talk about that briefly and how much that tickles me. We can move
that's
on to your fan theory.
that's beautiful. No, it's good. I mean, there's a bunch of Rambo. There's Rambo video games, and there were toys. I had one of the toys when I was a kid. I remember he fired a bazooka.
Mm.
But my fan theory is okay. So the first movie is actually based on a novel by David Morrell, it was his first novel. And at the end of the novel, it's fairly similar to the book. At the end of the novel, his commanding officer comes back and kills Rambo. Rambo dies at the end of that book, and that's actually an ending they shot for the first movie before they decided to go a different way. So there's footage you can see it on YouTube of the alternate ending of Rambo where Rambo has the gun up against his chest and he takes the bullet and dies. I like to think because the other three movies are so starkly different in tone from the first film that movies 2, 3, and 4 are fantasies that Rambo is having as he's dying, and that the fourth movie is him like making peace with himself. And it ends with the same shot that the first movie opens with, where he's wandering down. He's like walking down a lone stretch of road, and that's him going to heaven, essentially, moving on. That's my fan theory. That helps me enjoy the movies. I know that's not official or anything, but I like it. That's the way I like to think of it. It will be completely dashed when Rambo 5 comes out next year, which they are working on, by the way.
Of course they are.
This is beautiful.
Is he
Stallone
going to go
has
to fight ISIS? I hope he goes to fight ISIS.
drug cartels.
Drug cartels.
Drug cartels. I would like to see him fight ISIS, though. That would be amazing. But Stallone has also said he's writing it right now, and they're working on it, and he wants it to be Rambo's No Country for Old Men.
You know, I laugh at that, but after seeing Rambo, after what we talked about with Rambo 4, I'm kind of interested in that if that's what it actually is.
I'm gonna watch it. Um, I'm gonna watch it. There's gonna be ultra violence. It's gonna be hard R. The last one was so crazy with the disembowelments and things like that. So yeah, I'll watch Rambo fighting drug cartels, and with a No Country for Old Men sheen.
Yeah. I actually do want to talk about we kind of talked a little bit about the hyperviolence in 4, but let's really talk about the hyperviolence in 4 because it is very much filmed, and you mentioned it being grindhousey. 4 is filmed like a horror movie.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the depictions of violence are so over the top. And that was a major motion picture, released in the States, and it was the kind of level of violence that you would only see in a movie in the '70s. Like people getting their limbs blown off, explicitly shown, up close. Like a leg with the bone sticking out, and the bad guys are sticking the knives in there. It was kind of filmed like a horror movie. I hadn't considered that. Again, making it more akin to the first film than the other two.
Right. But it is interesting, and I think that hits into the theme that we were talking about with violence being maybe unpleasant but necessary. Like it's not depicted as pleasant. Um, in
No,
in sort of the way that I mean, it is fetishized in the weird sort of way that it does, but it also is depicted as being very troublingly violent.
yeah, everyone gets horrible blood on their hands. There's a scene where he gets into the 50 cal on top of a
Right,
jeep,
and that's the biggest one that I'm thinking of.
and he shoots the guy in the passenger seat, and the gore explodes all over him and the front of the gun. And for the rest of the scene, he's covered in, it's not just blood, but like hunks of this guy are all over him and the front of the gun. And then the violence that ensues after that continues much in that vein.
But that scene is interesting to me because I think it's really the only movie to show what high caliber bullets do. Because even in other movies, when someone gets hit by a high caliber bullet, they just die, and they kind of gloss over the fact that they just got hit by a 50 caliber bullet.
Yeah, the holes that go through the people, or if there's holes and not just explosion, are huge. They're gigantic. It really does. It's like the sniper bullets as well.
Well,
Really,
one of them
really
had,
feel their impact.
and one of them had, I think, a 50 caliber sniper rifle,
Yeah, it was
or
a
at
big.
least a high caliber one, and it helps really drive forward this idea of this is a bullet, it's impacting something, this is what it does. I'm not going to call it realistic necessarily because they're flying around and shooting each other with bows and arrows. In fact, he explodes somebody with a bow and arrow.
That has to happen in every single Rambo movie since the second one. He's always had those explosive tipped bows and arrows. That's such a Rambo thing. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it. We're talking about his most practical weapon.
The bow and arrow.
Right.
Yeah, that's the same shot in every movie too. I noticed this where he like peel back, focus on the arrowhead, then shift focus to him, like make a face, release arrow, explosion. Um, Kind of a beautifully consistent image in every single one of those. Since the second one, every single Rambo movie.
Never change, Stallone. Please
No,
don't change.
no, don't stop making Expendables, but keep making Rambos. You're good. I like the Rambos. Do you have any other issues with Rambo that you would like to discuss?
I don't know. I think we've been talking about Rambo for a long time now.
We have been talking about Rambo for a long time, and it's a beautiful thing. What would you like to do next? I have an idea.
Let's hear it.
All right, Jarhead 2.
Yes, let's do it.
Jarhead 2. For those of you who don't know, there is a sequel to Jarhead. It's Jarhead 2. It looks to go the complete opposite direction of the original movie, which was a sad meditation on being a Marine during the Gulf War and based on someone's memoir. This is obviously like a high-stakes action movie, and it looks awful. I haven't watched it yet, but I will watch it, and I will let you know just how awful it is the next time that you watch Movies Are Boring. My name is Matthew Galt. With me, as always, is Kevin Nodell. Say goodbye to the people, Kevin.
Goodbye, people.
Thank you for watching us, Internet, and we will see you next time.